Did that work? It's just...
Yep, we're live.
All right, cool. All right. No, hello, everyone. Welcome to Build Work Group meeting of Tuesday, the 16th, 2021. We'll be following the usual agenda. As usual, before I start, is there any announcements anyone wants to have or anything like that? No, cool. Right. So the first item on the agenda is the interest in establishing a build helper role, number 2550. So this is something that me and Michael have been discussing quite recently as a way to kind of boost kind of membership but more participation within build. From like the bit I've scoped it for to start off with would be aiming at collaborators being able to fix simple problems rather than us having to wait for one of us to be available. Say if a machine goes offline or an agent falls over or a disk fills up, that kind of stuff. So I think I've put in some couple ideas, but I think the next step really would be going out to the community and see if there's any interest before we even really bother to start trying with it. See what ask what the collaborators themselves would like to be able to do. I figured if we kind of gatekeep it that way, and even if we set up some tools or whatever so people can just log in and click a button so they don't have any real access to do any real damage, I think that would help, and it'd also kind of ease the load off us a bit so we can focus on some of the stuff we want to do. But I don't know if anyone has any thoughts or opinions on that so far.
I think your suggestion of next step is to go to the collaborators, see if we have anybody who has an interest. That would be good. Kind of like, it doesn't need to be a huge number of people. Even if we just get a couple people like we did for the triage helpers, it could help us sort of keep things up and going a bit more easily.
And I also thought that targeting collaborators people that already are existing collaborators would definitely cross the trust hurdle, because they're people that are already known to the project. They already have a stake in the project. So it's not like just some random Joe off the street that we don't know.
Yeah, exactly. I think we should definitely start and maybe even stick with, collaborators.
Yeah, we've been liberal in the past with handing out test access, and that's fine. I guess even if they do damage, like most of the infrastructure we have is rebuildable with Ansible. That's in test anyway. I think the challenge will be, if you get interest, might be to be able to document workflows that people can follow to fix things. That's the real challenge. I think we've got some of it done, but probably needs to be done in an organized way, and that probably needs to be offered up front as well. If people are interested, then we will create a collection of resources that you can go to that gives you some really simple ideas about how to fix issues, things like that. Otherwise, people are just going to be too intimidated by the complexity of our structures.
And I think we can start small, even if we have one thing the build helpers could fix, I think that would be a good starting point. And then, you can build the next one. So I don't think we have to document everything, but if we documented one or two things that they could do, that would be a good start.
Yeah, I definitely was of the opinion that it would be a fair amount of upfront work to get it into a place that it's foolproof, really. That way, it was going to be a lot of upfront work, but it should save us some effort in the long run, or there's hopefully less pinging of Node.js builds. People can fix their own problems. I think a key thing I can think of is release. If a release is blocked, and I know Richard is a member of the release team, so he's usually always around, but it'd be nice if the releases say, oh, this machine's broken. Oh, I just do this. I follow these simple 3 steps and I can fix it myself instead of waiting 6 or 8 hours, depending on time zones, for one of us to show up.
Yeah, or even like simple things in my mind, like if there's a machine that's misbehaving, being able to take a machine offline. I'm not sure if all of our collaborators can do that right now.
No, you have to be an admin of Jenkins, which is an even smaller subset of build, technically.
Right. So, I mean, is there something, I don't know if there's a way we could just let a machine be taken offline, in a more constrained way or something. I don't think, anyway, we don't want to solve the whole thing there, but it's the kind of thing, like if if the quickest fixes to, you know, or like, hey, say restart the Jenkins agent, you know, having somebody who can log in and just, you know, run a command if we documented that, or you know, take something out of the build or something like that, but kind of should be driven by what we see the problem, the biggest problem being, or something that's common that they can fix.
Yeah. So if everyone's happy, then I think the next week or so I'll open up a discussion in the Node core and ask for people's opinions.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I'll post a link in the chat. We have a doc that started to record some of the commands that we reuse to do sort of common things like restart agents and things. Unfortunately, it is different on different platforms due to the way we've set the agents up to start. But it's what we have at the moment written down. It could obviously be improved if we're opening it up to other people. But even things like there are a couple of actual jobs in Jenkins that you can run to either reboot or clean the workspaces on the Windows machines, which I've never actually logged into the Windows machines themselves, but have been able to recover some of them just by running a few of the jobs with the right sort of parameters selected to say, you know, reboot this machine and make sure it reboots.
Does that take any special privilege to be able to run those?
I would have to check because obviously,
sure,
obviously I'm in build, but you know, even if it did require privileges, we could scope it to individuals or a team. I guess my concern with it would be keeping track of if we start handing out additional permissions, how we track that.
Yeah, if we can build if it like in Jenkins, if we can make a build helper team.
Yeah, I think that really depends on how much interest we get, because if it's only one or two people, it may be doable at an individual level with sort of issues tracking who's been given what. But you know, if it's more than a small handful, then we might want to think about teams. And
agreed. My guess is will be small handful, but I'd be pleasantly surprised otherwise.
Yeah, I think it will be trying to break it down to what can be done with what access, because sometimes it's not immediately clear where problems are when things start going wrong on the CI. So if it's an individual machine, it might just be enough to have access to the machine, but equally it could require Jenkins permissions, for example, if you wanted to take the machine offline.
Yeah. So, but I think we're agreed. We can work through. There's probably some useful set, and as we build on to that, and if we had a couple people who were interested, we could then, you know, as they're like, hey, I couldn't do this, we could figure out if that's reasonable or not, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Right. Okay, so moving on to the next issue, which is the Apple Silicon builds. So update with this, I spoke with Mac Stadium last week before. I opened up a ticket with them. And then last week they gave us 3 M1 Mac Minis. They also said that the DTKs are due to go back in the next couple of weeks. So I've set up 2 of them as test machines. I've got 1 left over to potentially be a release or can go back in as a test depending on what we decide to do. So those machines are set up. I need to make some adjustments to the PR, or I need to verify what I've got, but they're currently running and they're passing and they're very fast. I think they're faster than our Linux One machines, which is surprising for a completely fresh build.
Don't say that.
they're on the same kind of 15 minutes for a completely fresh build, which is staggering. Good. So that's progressing. So the next steps will be what I have in my issue and stuff. It's all out in the open for the community, but it'll be things about researching stuff like the make file and getting the fat binaries together and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I'll just add a big thank you to Max stating basically we should take any opportunity to thank them for those, because that's great.
So with a release hat on, I would like to point out we have about a month, probably just less than a month until Node 16 goes out. As part of that, we do have a list of things that the release process expects to see on the server when we upload releases. So it would be handy if we were adding anything extra for the Apple Silicon builds to know about that ahead of time. It's not absolutely necessary because I guess it could come along in a minor, but yeah, it's kind of, if we want to make 16s GA, that's just less than a month away. So not much time.
Current plan isn't to add anything, right? It's just to convert those to be fat binaries versus x86 only.
Hopefully.
Yeah, maybe, because we released these Darwin x86 binaries, tarballs. So fat binaries in the package, the PKG file, so that wouldn't change, but
Okay.
I don't think, but there is an option there to add a tarball for Darwin ARM64. So my suspicion would be when we get there, we're probably going to want to add another asset. So I don't think that's a big deal if we can get the work done. That's the catch here in all this, because there's also the ARM cross compiler work that I need to do. I'm kind of bandwidth constrained at the moment, so I'm a little bit concerned about my ability to reach that timeline. But I'll try my best on what I need to contribute. But I suspect I'll need to help push the fat binary thing forward as well.
The tar will be easiest. It will be like an MVP, won't it? It should be the easiest to achieve.
Yeah, because then you won't need to do fat binary. You just need to. Yeah, in fact, you could start doing that now in non-release builds. We can even do it in release builds actually. And then when people show up and say, I want M1, then you just say use the tarball for now.
But that requires a release machine, doesn't it? Versus.
Yeah, I do have one left over.
Or maybe you can cross compile that as well.
Yeah, but just thinking off the top of the head, that if we're going to provide it anyway, that could be our first kind of stepping stone. So we release a tar, the fat binary is coming, because it would just be, I'm assuming people will want the binary over the tar. It'll be an easier user experience, but we could provide the tar first, faster. That way we could almost guarantee that it will be out by 16.
I think that sounds like a good backup plan, but we may not want to lock that in because we probably want some stability in how it's generated and not switch that mid-major.
Yeah.
So if we end up doing cross compiling for that as well, then switching that mid-major probably wouldn't be the end of the world, but maybe not ideal. Anyway, I have to go silent for a little while, for a few minutes. So
that's fine.
Bye for now.
So I wonder, I don't know, Ash, why would we provide the tar gzip as an ARM or two versions versus the PKG as a fat? Like, why wouldn't we just provide them both as fat binaries to start?
I don't know what's in the tar, to be honest with you. So I don't know how the tar is a binary inside the tar, isn't it?
Right.
Or is it?
So I just thought it was just another way of providing the same thing.
The tar is named Darwin x64. No, or is it macOS? No, it is Darwin still, isn't it? It's no Darwin 6 or 15, 16 dash x64.
Yeah. So Darwin is. Oh, it does say x64. I see.
They all have the architecture after them. Because nowhere else has this issue yet about multiple architectures. I mean, it's not major. It's just whether that would be confusing to tell people to download the x64 tarball on and on. I mean, I'm guessing whatever we do, we might need to communicate that to NVM, and I can imagine that a bit not insurmountable, but or logic to accommodate if it's not a one-to-one mapping.
So, okay, here's the other approach, is we could just duplicate them. Like if we actually copied it, so we actually had Node v1416 Darwin-x64 and -ARM, and they were both fat binaries. Right, like that would be no more extra building, just a copy somewhere.
That would be, is that not a storage constraint? because it's a bigger binary.
It could be symbolic links, maybe.
Oh yeah.
They were exactly the same binary.
Yeah,
I guess
I'm
that's
just trying to keep it as simple as possible and at the least amount that we need to do
Mm.
start, right? Like,
Yeah, the tar is less work up front, more work later, I think. Especially,
well, I don't know about less work up front. Like we need I mean, we need another machine, right? And it needs to change. So, we'd have to build something new. And I think also it was like the feedback from Rod was kind of like a lot of people will want one thing that runs anywhere, not a binary that's targeted for a particular platform.
Yeah.
Anyway, I guess maybe we should get Rod's feedback, because I sort of thought that what I understood from the last time when he was talking about is when we did the last transition, we just provided the fat binary.
Yeah.
And it kind of made sense from that, hey, that's something that anybody can run anywhere. And then, later on we can provide something, that's possibly platform specific.
Sorry, I am here.
Yep.
I think what we actually used to do is just the fat binary in the package, the PKG, and we had those tarballs, and I think we had a Darwin x86 as well as Darwin x64, and then we just dropped the x86 one when we dropped 32-bit, and but the PKG had both. It had the fat binary in it, and then I think. And you can actually look in the Makefile history to see this, because you can see the fat binary creation for, well, the previous Makefile anyway. So I think it was just for the PKG, and the others were just normal platform dependent binaries.
Yeah, I'm looking at the download here for v0.8, and it has a x86 tar and an x64 tar, and then just a PKG.
Okay, and those weren't fat binaries; they were like just for the platform.
Yeah. So I think
so, but that doesn't dictate what we have to do next. Like, if we want to do something different, I think we have permission to do that if we think that's a good strategy.
But yeah, there is a machine left over, which I purposely haven't added in case we needed a release machine. I know it wasn't planned, but we can get around with 2 at the moment because it's not a release platform. So I think the tar should be a fairly simple switch. Ideally, it should just build it anyway. I need to verify that first, but the thing that comes out should be an ARM binary. I just don't know if the tar process will be the same, or at least the naming. The naming might be what catches us out there. We'll probably name it as an x86 one.
Right.
No, it should name it. I think it'll name it correctly, but it might be interesting to consider whether cross-compiling the other way is the way to go. If these machines are so fast, maybe we should be cross-compiling the x64 binaries on these M1s.
I was more like, given shortest amount of limited amount of time, I think what we talked about was just switching our existing builds for Mac to create a fat binary. In which case we wouldn't have to do much in the release flow at all, right? Because it would just build a fat one. And if that, unless there's some extra dependencies or something other than the compiler, that should just then start giving fat binaries without us having to do anything.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, it's still work to put all that back in and make it actually compile. But what it has to do is do a full compile for x64, then it does a full compile for ARM64. So you've got 2 full compiles. I think what it used to do is to be able to actually package them up as those tarballs in the middle of that process before making the fat binary and doing the PKG file. So it's like you're doing a full compile anyway. You could make the tarballs from those platform versions, and then you make the fat binaries by gluing it all together. So it's the fat binaries are like that's everything, and these tarballs are like a step to get there. So
right,
once you get to fat binaries, then you've got everything anyway. That's sort of state this.
Not having looked at it, I thought like it was going to be like some extra option in the existing build thing that you say, okay, I want my final thing to be a fat binary, not I have to mangle it all together myself.
No, yeah, the step is there's this a live command, LIPO, and that's your fat binary. And then,
Sorry,
and then
you're
you just plug
chopping
that
up.
into your package making process. So it really is, you're gluing together binary. Oh, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now you're back to being okay. Okay, so you
I was
actually have
saying
to.
that there's this.
Sorry, go ahead. I think you're on mute now if you're trying to talk.
No, sorry, I'm actually going through a school zone here, so there's probably lots of people with Wi-Fi and stuff. There's a LIPO command that you glue together binaries. So you have to make the binary and you glue them together, and then it makes a fat binary. So it's not a special thing in step in the binary making process. There's this extra gluing step. So that's why this is so complicated, because you have to do 2 full builds. You have to do them in separate directories so that you can fetch out the node binary and then run the gluing process. So yeah, that's what.
Right. Okay. I was imagining they made it easier on us than that. But that sounds like, in
I think it's easier if you run Xcode.
Yeah, I think you're right. They've put everything in Xcode, and we don't build with Xcode. As in the actual application, Xcode itself. So if we were compiling a Swift app, it would be like that, easy.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I think it needs some digging up through the make files history and stuff. But it should be possible. Other people have done it. It's just we need to carve up some time for it.
Yeah, that will affect our testing strategy too. I was thinking we could just build the fat binary on both and then test on,
we don't currently test the binaries we built during the release process.
But I meant even in test, right? Like right now we actually, because we're going to end up, it sounds like, cross-compiling one of them, right?
Yeah, otherwise we'll have to have some really complicated build process which waits for a build to finish and somehow transfer the binary across. It's not possible, but that would be a lot of work in Jenkins.
Yeah, and I thought Xcode was going to actually make it more like magic, which doesn't sound like it is. So I was thinking if we did like the fat build on Mac and we did the fat build on x86 and then we tested on each of them, they would each use the native version of the fat binary. Even if you hadn't built them together, it was like, I thought it was like a common thing.
It is common. Coverage. It is common, but people do it with full Xcode. And if you have to recall that our version of Xcode is called Xcode emulation.py in JIP. So we implement our own version essentially of Xcode, and Google no longer supports JIP, so we have to now write it, because Xcode emulation.py was designed for a world where there was x86 and x64, and you could get away with doing this all on x64. And it's this problem that we have of, in our build process, you have to compile and run tools as part of the build. And that used to work when you were building everything on x64, because you could just build the tools as x64 and run them. But now we're doing that and we're running them against ARM64. So we have to have that split of, I'm building build tools on x64, but my output binary is ARM64. And that works great in the Linux cross-compile stuff in JIT, but the Xcode emulation stuff is really quite minimal.
Okay. So, I mean, I guess it's like, are we going to be, I was thinking we'd do that fat binary building, which doesn't sound like we do it all. In terms of testing, are we going to be okay if we just test, like we build and test natively on x86 and on M1, and then in release, we do a cross compile and glue them together?
Isn't that how some of the pies
in
work?
theory. Yeah, well, no, because in the pies we cross-compile
In both.
Right, yeah, okay.
We off the test, and so in it's fine because it's the same compiler, it's just running on different platforms. The catch is the way I had started working on this Xcode emulation fix is that we ended up having to pass a lot of manual the case, then we should end up with the same area.
I think we've completely lost him there, haven't we? He's gone through a tunnel or something. Oh yeah, we did fully lose him.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think testing cross-compiling from ARM to Intel would be a good first step as well. Just to make sure we can actually do the cross-compiling, I think should be a key first step. Because if that doesn't work, then it's all out the window. It should work because I think other people have got similar things working. But yes, once again, I think JIP is the bane of Node.js life.
Right. I don't know if he was about to say, like, I guess it's in terms of testing, then like we've got the testing we need in place then, it sounds like.
I'm currently testing native, yeah.
Right. So we build and compile, we compile and test on both native and non-native. And then actually providing the tars would be the easiest.
Yeah.
Like 2 tars. So maybe it's worthwhile to enable that so that this is where we got back to, like, on release, if we actually released native tar.gzips as well.
Yeah. In my mind, that should be the easiest, lowest hanging fruit step to get our build out. I still personally would eventually like to get the fat binaries out, and I think users would prefer that as well, because I know there are some people that will run Node, but they'll have no idea how to untar a file or something like that.
Right.
And they won't want to do it.
Right.
I also don't know if that would cause issues for downstream. I assume that would be fine, them just using a tar if they wanted to run deploy a native Apple Silicon binary into their product.
It depends whether they're trying to provide fat binaries or not themselves, right? Like,
yeah,
you're trying to bundle something that will run in both places.
Yeah.
But okay, it sounds like, yeah, my understanding was completely incorrect, or at least based on us using more of Apple's tools than we use. So yeah, I think based on that, from the original discussion, we should plan on providing a tar GZ, which is, you know, x86 and ARM is probably the lowest, the thing we can do most quickly and with the least risk. So I assume that means you got to spin up that other machine as a release machine, right?
Yeah, and it should be fairly simple. We have set of instructions. It's just
right
kind of things. But I did hold off in case I was doing it and I thought maybe we might need it.
But it seems like that would be good to set up, and then actually, you know, we can even try changing the release job to generate the binaries.
Yeah, it should be fine. It should be as simple as adding another label to the release job. But it just needs some testing, I think.
Yep. Yeah, I think it'll mostly be, does it work just out of the box once the machine's there.
Yes, I think I'll try and do that this week. I'll try and see if I can produce a tar, but also test cross-compiling from ARM to Intel. I'll try and see if I can carve up some time for that this week.
And is that the way we want to go?
As Rod pointed out, and I didn't think of this, the ARM machines are way faster than the Intel machines. They're constantly a source of, oh, the Mac builds are slow, or at least they were before we were moved. We were moved.
Right.
Mac Stadium upgraded our Orca cluster and things got speedier.
Right. It's just that like we only have, I think we kind of have a lot of the x86 Macs, don't we? Versus we only will have the one release machine.
In release, we only have one of each type anyway.
We have two Macs.
Yeah, apart from Mac.
Yeah.
But isn't that because we also run other jobs on the Macs rather than just?
Yeah, we have two of them because there's two Mac release jobs. I don't know if Jenkins is funny and tries to do them on the same, but there's the release tar and the release PKG job. So adding that one shouldn't cause any more overhead or less than that because we wouldn't be producing the PKG just yet.
I guess I'm more like, not that we need more than one at a time, but that I'm pretty sure it would be easy for Ash to spin up a new x86 Mac. I'm not so sure about the M1 at this point, right? Because they're a little bit tighter in supply. But
yeah, the M1 we have one, just the one left as a physical machine. I did look at the Orca cluster earlier because I know someone has asked, as well as you, Mike, about the Big Sur testing on Intel, and we have, I think, 40 CPUs and like nearly 120 gig of RAM left, so there's plenty of space.
That was just kind of my point, right? Like we can.
That was something I forgot as well.
We have lots of resources there versus limited resources, so should factor that in.
Yeah. Yeah, I can also spin up an issue to add them at some point when I get a chance.
So I'll say regarding cross-compiling, it probably would be worth experimenting anyway, Ash, on see if we can cross-compile the other way, because it should be the case that if you can do one way, you can do the other way just as easily. That's what this process is like. It's you've just got to get the pieces wired together, and then it's just a matter of supplying the right flags into the build process for it to happen. So if you can do it one way, you'll be able to do it the other way.
Okay. When you first did the cross-compiling, did you write what you did in an issue so I can have a little breeze through and have a look?
Yeah, I can't remember, but I think it was the main issue that has now become very noisy. I documented things that I did to make it work, and I did get a thing merged into JIP that should make it easier. So one of the steps has been merged. So I think you should be able to do it just by providing environment variables and some little minor hacks. So I think you should be able to pull it off. Yeah.
Cool. I'll have to dig through them as well. I remember seeing that, and that would make it easier for me as well.
Yeah, if you can't find it or it doesn't work, let me know in the issue. Just ping me there, and I should be able to.
Cool.
At this point, the other thing would be, if we mess it up, do we want, like, if we cross-compile x86 and we mess it up, is that going to affect more people than if we cross-compile M1 and mess it up?
Yeah, but I will say this platform has been the most forgiving because if we mess this up on Linux, like you've got the wrong glibc, then you've really seriously messed up. The Xcode process has been really solid in terms of compatibility, so I have a fair degree of confidence that this is going to be difficult to mess up if it works. Like if you can run a binary, then it should be solid wherever you can. So, I wouldn't worry too much about this build.
Okay. So I think we've got plenty of new steps. Some good discussion there. I think should we move on to the next issue? Unless anyone else has anything else extra to add? Right. Okay, next one is install Python 3 everywhere in CI. It's 2507. I know, Richard, you've been on top of this.
So this is really just an update. I've been going around the CI hosts, checking what versions of Python we have installed, and getting Ansible changes to get Python 3 onto the machines that don't already have it. There is a PR open in Node Coral about preventing or dropping support for Python 2 in Node 16 onwards. So this is like a precursor to that. But during this, I have found that a lot of our CI jobs are explicitly setting a Python environment variable, which is forcing the makefiles to use Python 2, regardless of whether a Python 3 is available on the machine or not. So the next issue on the agenda is one to track going through the jobs, and where the jobs are explicitly saying Python equals Python, just taking that out and letting the makefiles decide what Python they should be using. So the existing release lines have a default which says if Python isn't set, default it to Python with no numerical suffixes. And then in Node Core, there's a PR to change that default to Python 3. So Python 3 is always a Python 3 binary. And as far as possible, we'll try and keep the Python binary that's unversioned to be Python 2 so that the old releases continue to work as expected. But yeah, we're going through quite a lot of jobs by the look of it, just to take out a line that says Python equals Python, just so that we can start using Python 3 on the Node 16 builds.
Yeah, I went through this last year and found that when you start removing that, lots of stuff breaks. hopefully you have Python 3 installed on enough machines and the logic is right, because it was really painful when I tried last time.
My main concern is to try and keep the environment for the LTS releases as is. So I don't want to install Python 3 and then suddenly find my Python binary is a Python 3 binary, and we're now compiling Node 12 or something in a completely different tool chain. I mean, it should work. Well, 12 won't, but 14 should probably work on Python 3, but it's not something I want to do unless I'm really have no choice. So I am trying to work on the premise that we can keep the existing Python 2 installations, and Python 3 is like something extra that if we point the makefiles to, or the makefiles work out themselves, there's a Python 3 binary, you can use those. And the older releases that have no awareness of Python 3 will just blissfully continue their what they're doing at the moment. So yeah, I think I've got most of the machines. I put a question mark over the containers because I haven't gone onto the hosts to dig into each container, but our containers are on new enough versions of Linux that I'm pretty certain they must have Python 3 installed by default.
All right. Okay. I have a couple of other things that I forgot to add to the agenda. First is the GCC updates for 16.x. I've done all the IBM platforms. I've changed the select compiler. I've updated Node Core. So I think off the top of my head, all that's left is the latest version of SmartOS, which uses GCC 7. So that would need adding to the Ansible, and hopefully if it's, I don't know what SmartOS uses, but if it's just Yum, we should be able to install them side by side.
I don't know what it's called. The command is packaging. I was looking at it for the Python 3 install.
Well, so hopefully, if they're smart, they should be able to live.
There is a GCC 8 package available for SmartOS 8. I haven't installed it. I just searched for it.
Okay.
On the machine.
And then I think, is there an ARM one? I can't remember. It's cross-compiling. It's at the top of my head, I think.
Yeah, ARM v7 cross-compilers, and that was on me. I will try and get to this as soon as I can. I don't have the highest degree of confidence in this process. So it's like, once it works, I sort of like take my hands off gently and then don't touch it again. So just getting it working in the first place is the tricky bit. But I did do an experimental GCC 8. I think it was not even last year, it was earlier than that. So there is an experimental one there that probably need to update the cross-compile toolchain thing to make it with the newer one. And then we'll see. But it's this whole question of which version of libc and all those sort of things. Got to get everything right. And otherwise we'll have users complaining this binary doesn't run on my obscure single board computer with a weird operating system.
So are we going to have to set up a parallel cross compiler to keep the existing ones for the releases that we're currently building?
No. So there's we have a CC selector for cross compiling that is already doing clever logic for selecting the compiler. I think we might be now, it's just selecting one toolchain now, but the logic is all there. So that just needs to be amended to when a certain node major comes in, it selects the right compiler. So I think all that's in place. It just needs to be this new thing needs to be added.
Yeah.
And these are, I'm just trying to think like this, this is to support ARM v7 still, right? Versus ARM v8.
Yeah. Yeah.
Raspberry
So,
Pi
yeah,
4s. So go ahead.
Yeah, ARM v7. ARM64 we have native builders for, so that's all taken care of. But presumably they have GCC8. I haven't looked at that. The data's all native. That's not cross. This cross is now only for ARM v7, which is still used by Raspberry Pi. I don't think Raspberry Pi has gone native ARM64 yet, even though the boards are. It's just the operating system is, well, last time I checked, still being released as compiled ARM v7. So, and there's just tons of single board computers out there that are still ARM v7. So we could choose to remove that at some point, but
that's what I was just trying to understand. Is like, are we at that point yet? It sounds like not.
I don't think so. It might be worth checking, like seeing, because Raspberry Pi were looking at transitioning their builds so that if you have a newer Raspberry Pi, you should use a newer Raspbian compile or a different Raspbian compile. It's just that their Raspbian compiles were meant to support lowest common denominator, and they're still releasing these what are they, Pi Zeros, which are ARM v6. So yeah, it's all very complicated.
We've already sailed on that one though, right? So
yeah,
we removed ARM v6.
Yeah. We could think about being more aggressive, but I don't know if we're ready to have that sort of strategic conversation just at the moment.
It's maybe a bit late. I just thought we should keep that in mind, like, because they just cause us a lot of time and effort, right?
Ash, are we in a position to get the download numbers for ARM?
That is my next point. Let's go add. So I've got, on the topic of the metrics, I've got the summaries working from the summary file that you produced, Rod, in 2019, that JS file that outputs them all in a JSON object. So what I was thinking for like my next step is, I know Michael was asking me access to the web server. I was going to set up a cron job that runs every day and downloads the previous day's data and outputs as a JSON file, which we can then serve on the web page so that the metrics are there. And then we can decide whether we want to glue them together, make new graphs and stuff like that. The download itself, the traffic is, the files are no bigger than 900 kilobytes and there's 288 a day. So I did the maths and it was under 300 meg or something in total. I'd have to redo that. But I just wanted to ask if that's what people were okay with for a next step, so that people can start looking at these numbers again. Because when I look at what's there currently, the summaries are they're 4 separate files. They're all in CSV. So that would involve me taking some steps to split the data back out, change formats and that kind of stuff, which again would take more time. So I'm at a point where I can start sharing the results, and then we can start thinking if we want to redo what we already have. Do we glue back together what we had? Do we produce new graphs, different graphs, that kind of thing? So I wanted to ask what people's opinions were.
Yeah, I think for Rod, the question was like, did you intend to change the format?
I at this stage, you do whatever you think is right and whatever's easiest. Like, it's been down for long enough that anything that was baked in with the old formats can be redone. So there's an option here to do something better and different. And if you think you have that path and others agree, that's fine. I don't. Yeah, the intention with those things, I said this before, the intention was always that we provide the raw data and hopefully other people would do interesting things with it. It just never really happened. The raw data was there, but people just looked at our graphs. So
okay,
just some numbers would be interesting.
I'm kind of tempted to just like, you've got a new format in the JSON that's probably pretty easily consumable. Just start publishing that and leave it at that, right? If people want fancy graphs, you should be able to write something pretty easily to generate them, right?
Yeah, if people are interested, the PR I have open in build does have a drop down with the JSON output. It's not sorted because I forgot to sort it by numbers, so it's a bit all over the place. But there are distinct blocks. You've got versions, and you've got countries, then you've got OSs, then you've got platforms. So they're all separate objects within a JSON object. So if someone was to use the data, it's quite easily to access it all and iterate over it. But if you're okay with that, I should be setting up some time with Johan this week so I can discuss getting it out there without me breaking things, which I think would be good. And hopefully sometime soon I can put the raw data on. We can turn off what's currently running. There's still some metric stuff running that produces like 100 lines or whatever of inaccurate data from somewhere on the web server. But we can switch that job off. And
it's probably the traffic that comes back to us that's not served by Cloudflare.
Okay.
So I think the other thing, Ash, you mentioned too, and just Roddy, think this makes sense, is we were thinking we might create like a new subdirectory, which is like JSON or something, just to have the new files show up, because they're going to be a different format, have them show up in that new directory.
Yeah, I was going to have produce some snappy name, something like the new summary. So we'd say, if you want to look at what our current accurate-ish data is, you can't go to this directory and you download these files, and I've chosen the same naming format, so there will all be node access log timestamp.json. So it should be very easy to ask people to access. And if anyone's interested, it's about 2 million downloads a day over that from a random couple of days I picked up.
Yeah, it's the trends that are mostly interesting. So you can, I don't remember what even it used to be, but I know that should be a lot more than what it was. It'd just be interesting to see that. But yeah, raw data would be great. And then if people want more information, you can tell them just go download it, figure it out yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And people will. I think maybe it was just because we provided them the basics, people just didn't need to go any further.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even if somebody's interested, if they generate it and want to help us then share it, that would be great.
Yeah. I also, part of me is hoping that some people in the community will step up and say, oh, we'll write a new metrics page, because the metrics page is quite dated and doesn't seem to fit my screen. It's very small. But that's a little pipe dream.
But it sounds like we're okay just saying like, let's get the data in JSON out there, and then we can actually declare victory in terms of it's available.
Yeah.
And then where it goes
almost
from
2
there
years
wherever
later.
it goes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But it'll be good to be able to say like how many are there per day for sure, like, because that's an important stat.
Okay, so if all happy with that, I'll get have a chat with Johan. I'll get Richard to add my key to the web server.
Sounds good.
Yeah, but yeah, off the top of my head, that'd be good. Johan's looking to schedule some one-to-one time anyway to discuss the joint backup servers and that. That's reminded me of another thing. I spoke to Brian from Joint about getting a management console for those new machines. And he says that what they offer is a command line interface that is read-only or read-write. So I think it'd be something for the Node Infra members, but whether we have to be very careful with it, because we can end up creating resources that will incur charges, but I don't think we'll ever plan to do that anyway. But it's not,
Yeah.
I don't think they provide a nice shiny UI, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, I'm not totally surprised at that.
Yeah.
So I guess this is one thing just to mention to Rod too, since I know you set up most of the Docker stuff. We did accidentally lose one of the Docker hosts, which we didn't realize was one of the machines running in the joint infrastructure. I think if we need to restore that, we should, set that up in one of the other infrastructures. So I don't know if you have a take.
I commented in follow-up to Richard's comment about that,
Okay.
that I think we will need additional. The problem is that those hosts are quite large machines.
Right.
So finding an appropriate place to extract those resources will be the trick.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, until something, we could defer this until something breaks, but I'm just suspecting very strongly that things will break.
No, we should plan to figure out where we would, which one of our existing donators would be most amenable.
Yeah, well, it's getting a bit tight, isn't it? I have to go, so I'm going to check out of this meeting, but thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining. I think
Thanks.
that's the end of the discussion anyway. Does anyone else have any final words to add? No. All right, cool. Thanks everyone for joining.